Stop everything you're doing right now because what I'm about to reveal will absolutely blow your mind. 24 hours after the Supreme Court told Donald Trump his tariffs are illegal, Trump raised them even higher. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 on Friday that Trump violated federal law by imposing global tariffs without congressional approval. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the majority opinion. 2 of Trump's own appointees voted against him. The court said the tariffs were illegal and had to stop. Trump responded by immediately announcing new tariffs. Then on Saturday morning, Trump raised those new tariffs from 10% to 15%. He posted on social media that the new tariffs take effect immediately. He called the Supreme Court ruling ridiculous, poorly written, and extraordinarily anti-American. And he is using a different law to impose the exact same tariffs the Supreme Court just struck down. This is not compliance with a court order. This is defiance of the Supreme Court. I have the timeline of what Trump did in the 24 hours after losing at the Supreme Court. I have the legal authority he is claiming. I have why constitutional experts say this is unprecedented. And I have what happens if Congress does not stop him in 150 days. This is a constitutional crisis. The Supreme Court said no, and the president said yes anyway. Comment right now if you think Trump is violating the Constitution by defying the Supreme Court. Let me start with what the Supreme Court actually ruled on Friday, because this was one of the biggest legal defeats of Trump's presidency. On February 20th, the Supreme Court issued a 6-3 decision in the case Learning Resources, Inc. versus Trump. The question was simple. Does the International Emergency Economic Powers Act give the president the authority to impose tariffs on every country in the world for an unlimited period of time? Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the opinion for the majority. The answer was no. Roberts said Trump claimed he had the independent power to impose tariffs on imports from any country of any product at any rate for any amount of time. And Roberts said those 2 words in the statute cannot bear such weight. The court ruled that Congress never gave the president that kind of sweeping authority. The tariffs were illegal. They had to stop. 6 justices signed the majority opinion: Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Sotomayor, Justice Kagan, Justice Jackson, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Barrett. Gorsuch and Barrett are Trump's appointees. Trump nominated them, the Senate confirmed them, and they just voted to strike down his signature economic policy. 3 justices dissented: Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, and Justice Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh is also a Trump appointee, so Trump appointed 3 justices. 2 voted against him, 1 voted with him. That is how badly Trump lost at the Supreme Court. Hit subscribe right now because what Trump did next will shock you and you need to see every detail. Now let me show you Trump's immediate response because he did not accept the ruling. Trump held a press conference on Friday afternoon just hours after the Supreme Court decision. He was supposed to talk about his Board of Peace initiative. Instead, he spent most of the time attacking the Supreme Court. Trump said the court's decision was deeply disappointing. He said he was ashamed of the justices who ruled against him. He specifically called out Gorsuch and Barrett. Trump said, "What happened today with the 2 United States Supreme Court justices that I appointed against great opposition, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, whether people like it or not, never seems to happen with Democrats." He was saying, "I appointed you, you owe me, and you betrayed me." Then Trump said something that should have been a warning. He said, "We have other tools." He said the Supreme Court ruling does not end tariffs. He said he has other legal authorities and he will use them. That was Friday afternoon. By Friday night, Trump had signed a new executive order imposing a 10% global tariff on every country in the world. He used a completely different law, not the International Emergency Economic Powers Act that the Supreme Court just struck down. A different law called Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. Drop a comment if you think Trump planned this defiance before the court even ruled. Now let me explain what Section 122 actually is, because Trump is betting everything on this obscure law. Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 allows the president to impose a temporary import surcharge of up to 15% if there are large and serious United States balance of payments deficits. A balance of payments deficit means the country is importing way more than it is exporting. The United States has a massive trade deficit. In 2025, the trade deficit was over $900 billion. So Trump meets that requirement. But here's the catch. Section 122 tariffs can only last for 150 days. After 150 days, Congress has to approve an extension. If Congress does not approve, the tariffs automatically expire. And here is the other catch. Section 122 has never been used to impose tariffs. Ever. In the 52 years since the law was passed, no president has invoked Section 122 to impose tariffs. Not Gerald Ford, not Jimmy Carter, not Ronald Reagan, not Bill Clinton, not George W. Bush, not Barack Obama. Trump is the first. So Trump lost at the Supreme Court on Friday afternoon. By Friday night, he signed an executive order using a law that has never been used before to impose the exact same tariffs the Supreme Court just told him were illegal. And then on Saturday morning, Trump made it worse. Share this video if you think Trump is deliberately testing the limits of presidential power. Now let me show you what Trump did on Saturday, because this is where the defiance becomes even more extreme. On Saturday morning, February 21st, Trump posted on Truth Social. He said he had done a thorough, detailed, and complete review of the ridiculous, poorly written, and extraordinarily anti-American decision issued by the Supreme Court. That is how Trump described a Supreme Court ruling. Ridiculous, poorly written, anti-American. Then Trump said, "Please let this statement serve to represent that I, as President of the United States of America, will be, effective immediately, raising the 10% worldwide tariff to the fully allowed and legally tested 15% level." Read that again. Trump raised the tariffs from 10% to 15% less than 24 hours after announcing the 10% tariffs. He went from losing at the Supreme Court to imposing 10% tariffs to raising them to 15% in the span of one day. And he said the increase takes effect immediately. Trump did not wait for Congress. He did not wait for a legal review. He just announced on social media that tariffs are now 15%, and that is final. Comment right now if you think Trump is out of control and needs to be stopped by Congress. Now let me show you why this is legally questionable, because constitutional experts are sounding the alarm. The Supreme Court ruled that Trump does not have the authority to impose unlimited tariffs using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Trump's response was to impose tariffs using Section 122 of the Trade Act instead. But here is the problem. The Supreme Court's reasoning applies to Section 122 as well. Chief Justice Roberts said the major questions doctrine prevents the president from making decisions of huge economic significance unless Congress clearly and explicitly gave him that power. Imposing 15% tariffs on every country in the world is a decision of huge economic significance. Did Congress clearly and explicitly give the president that power in Section 122? No. Section 122 was designed for temporary emergency measures to address balance of payments crises. It was never intended to be a permanent tool for rewriting America's entire trade policy. Multiple law professors have said Trump's use of Section 122 is likely unconstitutional for the same reason his use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act was unconstitutional. One professor told reporters the Supreme Court said the tariffs are illegal. Trump's response was to say, "Fine, I will make them legal under a different law." That is not how the separation of powers is supposed to work. Another expert said, if the president can lose at the Supreme Court and then immediately do the exact same thing using a different statute, what is the point of judicial review? Hit subscribe because this constitutional crisis is escalating and Congress has to act within 150 days or the tariffs become permanent. Now let me show you the timeline Trump is working with, because this is critical. Trump signed the Section 122 executive order on Friday night, February 20th. The tariffs take effect on Monday, February 24th at 12:01 a.m. That is 2 days from now, and the tariffs remain in place for 150 days unless Congress acts. 150 days from February 24th is July 23rd, 2026. So here is what happens. The tariffs go into effect on Monday. For the next 5 months, American businesses and consumers pay 15% more on imported goods from every country. If Congress does not vote to extend the tariffs by July 23rd, the tariffs automatically expire. But if Congress does vote to extend them, the tariffs can remain in place indefinitely. This puts enormous pressure on Congress. Republicans control the House. If Speaker Mike Johnson brings a vote to extend Trump's tariffs, Republicans will have to choose. Do they vote yes and endorse tariffs that the Supreme Court said are unconstitutional? Or do they vote no and defy the president? Either way, they lose. Democrats are in a similar bind. If they vote no, they are blocking tariffs that many voters support. If they vote yes, they are legitimizing Trump's defiance of the Supreme Court. This is a no-win situation for everyone except Trump. Drop a comment if you think Congress should refuse to extend the tariffs and let them expire in July. Now let me show you the economic impact, because this affects every American. The 15% tariff applies to all imports. That means everything from cars to clothes to electronics to food gets more expensive. The Tax Foundation estimated that Trump's previous tariffs added about $1,000 in costs for the average American household in 2025. The new 15% tariff will add even more. Economists estimate that a 15% global tariff could raise consumer prices by 2 to 3% across the board. If you are buying a car, you pay more. If you are buying furniture, you pay more. If you are buying a computer, you pay more. And that is on top of the inflation Americans are already dealing with. Businesses are also furious. The Supreme Court ruling was supposed to provide relief. Companies that paid Trump's tariffs were expecting refunds. The government collected over $160 billion in tariffs that the Supreme Court just ruled were illegal. Businesses want that money back. But instead of getting refunds, they are now facing new tariffs that are even higher than the old ones. The CEO of a major import company told reporters, "We thought the Supreme Court ruling meant we would finally get relief from these tariffs. Instead, Trump just imposed new tariffs that are worse. This is going to devastate small businesses that cannot afford to absorb these costs." Share this video if you think American families will suffer because Trump is defying the Supreme Court. Now let me show you what Trump said about his own Supreme Court appointees because this is personal for him. Trump posted on Truth Social attacking Gorsuch and Barrett. He said, "What happened today with the two justices I appointed never seems to happen with Democrats. They vote against the Republicans and never against themselves almost every single time, no matter how good a case we have." Then Trump praised the justices who voted with him. He said, "My new hero is United States Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and of course, Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that they want to make America great again." This is unprecedented. A sitting president publicly attacking Supreme Court justices by name for ruling against him. A sitting president saying his appointees betrayed him. A sitting president dividing the Supreme Court into MAGA justices and non-MAGA justices. This undermines the independence of the judiciary. It sends a message to future justices. If you rule against the president who appointed you, you will be publicly humiliated. And it raises the question, does Trump believe Supreme Court justices owe him personal loyalty? Because that is what it sounds like. Comment right now if you think Trump's attacks on the Supreme Court are damaging the rule of law. Now let me show you what Democrats are saying because they are calling this a constitutional crisis. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said the Supreme Court ruling was a victory for the American people and the rule of law. But Schumer also said Trump's decision to impose new tariffs hours after the ruling shows he has no respect for the separation of powers. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said Trump is acting like a dictator who believes he is above the law. And multiple Democratic lawmakers said if Trump can ignore the Supreme Court and impose tariffs anyway, what other laws will he ignore? Representative Jamie Raskin said, "The Supreme Court told the president he broke the law. The president's response was to break the law again using a different statute. That is not how our constitutional system works." Representative Adam Schiff said, "If we allow the president to defy the Supreme Court with no consequences, we no longer have a system of checks and balances. We have an imperial presidency." And Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, "Trump is testing whether Congress and the courts will stop him. If we do not act now, he will keep pushing until there are no limits on his power." Hit subscribe because Democrats are promising to fight Trump's tariffs in Congress, and you need to see what happens next. Now let me show you what Republicans are saying because they are deeply divided. Some Republicans are defending Trump. Senator Josh Hawley said the Supreme Court was wrong and Trump is right to use every legal tool available to protect American workers. Senator Ted Cruz said Trump has the constitutional authority to impose tariffs and the Supreme Court overstepped. And Senator Tom Cotton said Trump is fighting for America's economic interests and Congress should support him. But other Republicans are uncomfortable. Senator Mitt Romney said Trump needs to respect the Supreme Court's authority even when he disagrees with the ruling. Senator Lisa Murkowski said imposing new tariffs hours after losing at the Supreme Court sends the wrong message about the rule of law. And Senator Susan Collins said she has concerns about whether Section 122 gives the president the authority Trump is claiming. The Republican caucus is split, and that split could determine whether Trump's tariffs survive the 150-day deadline. Drop a comment if you think Republicans in Congress are too afraid of Trump to stop him. Now let me show you the international response because America's trading partners are watching this closely. The European Union issued a statement saying the Supreme Court ruling was a step toward restoring normal trade relations. Then Trump announced new tariffs, and the EU said it was deeply disappointed. The EU is now considering retaliatory tariffs on American goods. China issued a statement saying trade wars benefit nobody and calling on the United States to respect international trade rules. Canada said it is reviewing its options. Mexico said it will defend its economic interests. And South Korea said it is preparing for all scenarios, including a trade war. Every major U.S. trading partner was hoping the Supreme Court ruling would end the tariff chaos. Instead, Trump escalated, and now the global economy is facing even more uncertainty. Stock markets are volatile, currency values are fluctuating, and businesses around the world world are trying to figure out what comes next. One European diplomat told reporters, "We thought the Supreme Court would force Trump to back down. Instead, he doubled down. We have no idea what he will do next." Share this video if you think Trump's tariff war is hurting America's relationships with allies. Now let me show you the refund issue, because this could cost the federal government over $175 billion. The Supreme Court ruled that Trump's tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act were illegal. That means every dollar collected under those tariffs was collected illegally. Companies are already filing lawsuits demanding refunds. One estimate says the federal government could owe more than $175 billion in refunds to importers. That is $175 billion that has to be paid back. But here is the problem. The Supreme Court did not order refunds. The court said the tariffs were illegal, but sent the refund question back to lower courts. So now there will be years of litigation over whether companies get their money back. And even if companies win refunds, consumers will not see that money. If you paid higher prices for sneakers or furniture because of Trump's tariffs, you are not getting a refund. The money goes back to the companies that paid the tariffs, not to the people who paid higher prices. So consumers lose twice. They paid higher prices under the illegal tariffs, and now they will pay higher prices under the new tariffs. Comment right now if you think every American who paid higher prices because of Trump's tariffs deserves a refund. Now let me show you what happens if Congress does nothing, because that is a real possibility. If Congress does not vote on Trump's tariffs by July 23rd, the tariffs expire automatically, but Trump could just impose them again using another law. Or he could declare a national emergency and claim different authority. Or he could negotiate individual trade deals with countries and impose tariffs that way. The point is, Trump has multiple options. And if Congress does not act, Trump will keep cycling through different laws and different justifications to impose the same tariffs over and over. That is why some constitutional experts are saying this is bigger than tariffs. This is about whether the president has to follow the law. The Supreme Court said Trump's tariffs were illegal. Trump imposed them anyway using a different law. If the Supreme Court strikes down the new tariffs, Trump will use another law. And if that law gets struck down, he will use another one. At some point, Congress has to step in and say, no, you cannot keep doing this. The courts have spoken. You have to stop. But Congress is paralyzed by partisanship, and Trump knows it. Hit subscribe, because the next 150 days will determine whether we still have a functioning system of checks and balances. Now let me show you what legal experts are predicting, because they think this will end up back at the Supreme Court. Multiple law professors have said Trump's use of Section 122 is just as unconstitutional as his use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The major questions doctrine applies to both. If imposing unlimited tariffs under one emergency law is unconstitutional, imposing unlimited tariffs under a different emergency law is also unconstitutional. So companies will sue, the case will go to federal court, the federal court will rule, and eventually the case will reach the Supreme Court again. But here is the problem. That process takes time, months, maybe years. And in the meantime, the tariffs are in effect. Consumers are paying higher prices, businesses are struggling, the economy is suffering. And Trump gets what he wants. Even if he loses in court eventually, he wins in the short term. That is the strategy. Impose tariffs, get sued, lose in court. Impose new tariffs under a different law, get sued again, lose in court again. Repeat. As long as Congress does not act, Trump can keep doing this forever. Drop a comment if you think the Supreme Court needs to act faster to stop Trump's abuse of power. Now let me show you the political calculation Trump is making, because this is about the midterm elections. The midterms are in November 2026. That is 9 months away. Trump's approval rating is at 38%. Republicans are facing a bloodbath. Democrats are leading in the generic ballot by 6 points. Trump needs something to energize his base. Tariffs are popular with Trump's supporters. They believe tariffs protect American jobs. They believe tariffs punish China and other countries that have been ripping off the United States. So Trump is betting that tariffs will help Republicans in the midterms. But there is a risk. If tariffs cause inflation to spike, if gas prices go up, if consumer prices go up, voters will blame Trump. And that could make the midterms even worse for Republicans. Trump is gambling that the political benefits of tariffs outweigh the economic costs, and he is gambling that he can defy the Supreme Court without facing consequences. So far, he has been right. Congress has not stopped him, the courts have not stopped him, and voters have not punished him. But that could change if the economy crashes. Share this video if you think Trump's tariffs will backfire and cost Republicans the midterms. Now here is what happens next. The tariffs take effect on Monday, February 24th at 12:01 a.m. For the next 150 days, American businesses and consumers will pay 15% more on imported goods. Congress has until July 23rd to vote on whether to extend the tariffs. If Congress votes yes, the tariffs continue indefinitely. If Congress votes no or does nothing, the tariffs expire. But Trump could impose new tariffs under yet another law, or he could negotiate individual deals with countries, or he could declare a national emergency and try again. The Supreme Court has said Trump's tariffs are illegal. Trump has said he does not care. He will impose tariffs anyway using whatever legal authority he can find. And unless Congress or the courts stop him, Trump will keep doing this. This is not about trade policy anymore. This is about whether the president has to follow the law. The Supreme Court said, no, you cannot do this. Trump said, yes, I can. Watch me. And now we are in a constitutional crisis where the executive branch is openly defying the judicial branch. Subscribe, share, and comment because this is the most important constitutional battle of 2026. The Supreme Court ruled against Trump. Trump defied the court. And Congress has 150 days to decide what kind of country we want to be. Do we have a system where the president follows the law, or do we have a system where the president does whatever he wants and dares Congress and the courts to stop him? The next 5 months will answer that question, and the answer will define American democracy for generations.